Good afternoon and welcome to the day 3 of Refining and Petrochemicals World RE 2021. Our theme this year is Flexible Refining for Future Sustainability. Our first session for this day is New Technology Interventions, and we have Mr. V. Nandakumar, CGM MRPL, as our session chairman. A little bit more about Mr. Nandakumar. He has over 27 years of experience in oil refining. He has been working at Mangalore Refinery and Petrochemicals since 1993 and presently heading the production planning section and QC R&D section of the organization. He has worked in production process and project departments and in the refinery head office in various capacities, closely associated with all the major milestones in the growth of the organization. He has proved as a team player, a team leader, a strategist, and a capable manager and administrator. As head of the R&D section, he has filed more than 14 patents and has 2 Indian patents recently awarded. Worked as a project manager handling 4 process unit projects, PFCCU, HGU, SRU, and ETP projects with a combined capex of 400 million, that is approximately 2,400 crores under MRPL's Phase 3 expansion. Also worked as a team leader, form process engineering for latest BS6 fuel quality implementation project and the refinery expansion studies. He is a member of the PCD at BIS India and convener to the subcommittee 3.2 on aromatic hydrocarbons and petroleum solvent preservatives. He is also one of the 3 expert panel members formed by Department of Chemicals and Petrochemicals, Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, Government of India, for selecting and monitoring institutions under its Center of Excellence program. He is a Bachelor of Technology and Chemical Engineering from Government Engineering College, Thrissur, Calicut, and graduated with University first rank. He has also done a postgraduate certificate program in management at the TAPI Management Institute, Manipal. So over to Mr. Nandakumar for beginning today's session.
Thank you, Mavis, for the sweet introduction. And welcome to the first session of the day of the program of Refining and Petrochemicals World IE 2021. So we are having a second session on the new technology interventions. Understand that yesterday we had a session on the technology part, which was mostly related to the process side, or rather the configuration side of it. Today, the theme will be towards the enablers of the business, basically. So we'll be talking mainly on the reliability, safety, and those who support the business so that the business objectives are fulfilled. So we have a panel of accomplished professionals in this group, starting with Ms. Andrea, then Dr. Varadan, and Dr. Christina Fang, and Mr. Tansen. So they'll be taking through the various aspects and various technological niche, which probably will address some of the challenges the industry is facing today. So I understand, Mavis, you'll be taking a brief introduction before the speaker, and then while the time they can load the presentation and upload the slides. And because this entire session is about 1 hour, so we'll have to really control the times. Understand at the end of the session there will be a Q&A session, so that any questions which can combine and take it up to us the end of the session. So the first topic which we'll be addressing today is on role of technologies in energy transition and specific to India. Will be taken by Andrea, Director Energy Transition APAC region of Worley. So over to you, Andrea.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Andrea, I would like to give a little brief introduction about you. In the meanwhile, you can share the screen for your presentation. Just give me one moment. Andrea is a leading energy transition sales for Worley in Asia Pacific. She engages with established and emerging energy and resource companies taking action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Andrea has built her career in the renewable sector with a focus on emerging economies in Asia. Holding a master's degree in international relations from the Graduate Institute in Geneva, she's been focusing on emerging markets, technologies, and development economies. She's passionate about bridging the gap towards more cleaner economies through project and technology enablement. Prior to joining the Worley Group, Andrea has held various roles for technology companies and professional service providers as a management consultant, a strategist, and a market developer. Over to Ms. Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind introductions. And good afternoon all. I hope you can see my slide currently on the title slide. So it's a great opportunity to present Worley's perspective on the role of technologies, including new technologies in general across the energy transition, but also in India. Now, the purpose and the insights I'll be sharing is not about a singular technology, but focuses to set the various technologies into perspective of each other, but also into a bigger picture. Well, we all understand how fundamental technology is to enable the energy transition, but the uncomfortable truth, or what is a bit more uncomfortable to admit, is just understanding the technology by the commercial and technical readiness is actually not enough. The reality and the complexity on how to deliver the projects at the scale and speed we need to meet net zero is way more complicated. So, and that's the theme for today. It's to actually weaving the different threads needed, and technology is one of them, to make it real and meet net zero. Worley collaborated with Princeton University, and we asked ourselves, how do we make the transition to net zero real? The what is pretty much understood. The dynamics of climate change is also understood. If you look at the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, you realize the magnitude and the urgency of action. Now, to achieve mid-century net zero ambitions will require pace and scale of delivery of engineered solutions that is unprecedented in global terms. Now, there's been a lot of great thinking in that space, but what's been the missing piece and what's been the focus of working with Princeton University is actually around the infrastructure and the role of technology in it. To give you a sense of the size of the challenge we are confronted with, and this has been presented at the Hydrogen Congress last year, if we meet net zero by 2050, we would need to build the largest carbon capture and storage project currently running every week from now until 2050. We would need to build the largest solar plant ever built every 3 days. Or every 2 hours, we would need to build the largest green hydrogen project built ever, every 2 hours. So that's kind of just an indication of the size of the challenge we are confronted with, and it almost makes it unreal. So in order to make it real, we need to reimagine how big projects are delivered. Business and governments across the world must step up to engage, design, and build it. And if we don't, we will simply not reach the emissions reduction targets. Now, what this graph actually says is that the best policy in the world in isolation will not lead to the impact desired. There is a need to change delivering practices of large projects in tandem with appropriate policies to have that material impact. Now, the bigger picture is however, a bit more complicated, and there's been significant effort to actually map these out and map out the dynamics around that. There are numerous elements influencing outcomes, and the net zero infrastructure supply side is dependent on many things, and it's highly complex. The easy bit is to understand the technology. It's there. We can do studies. We do studies to understand the readiness levels. The gaps to the commercial applications is actually also quite easy to understand. But let's look at all these other threats which are needed to be considered to make it work. The raw materials, or the demand side, or the supporting infrastructure, from mining and manufacturing to cloud hardware to security. This is all what needs to be considered when we look at the technologies at play to make a net zero happen. Now, the research done is actually quite long, and I'll be happy to share the link to the actual paper in the chat box later on. But going a bit fast forward, what's the key findings? What do we need to do differently? So there needs to be a different understanding of value. We need to look at this away from a pure economic and commercial perspective, but towards a socio-economic and environmental perspective. This is a single opportunity we have for the humanity to include future generations and ensure future resources of our planets are made available and risks are mitigated, risk of extreme weather are mitigated. Now also the role of digital is absolutely huge and a key enabler. Key partnerships, we need to rethink, and we as Worley, we actually see how stakeholders around major projects that actually engage with each other differently. And that is brilliant to see, yet it just needs to increase in pace and scale and needs to be replicated. Now, what is very important in this is that an acknowledgement that there is not a one solution for all. And I think that holds very much true for India as well. There is this paradigm, it's like, well, let's just do this or let's just do that. The reality is that there's so many unknowns, there's so much uncertainty across that one cannot just take a decision which is a right decision. One needs to, at this point of time, consider and look at all different technologies, all different ways to start moving into that direction. And therefore, from a business perspective, it's a lot about actually risk management and understanding where to place the bets and where to make the efforts, where most likely there is success. But that's, again, extremely difficult. Now, every country will have its own mix of technology solutions. Now, a lot of eyes at the moment are on Europe, and that's actually a good example to learn from. Yet every country has its own predisposed resources and circumstances, or even in the case of India, every state is different, and that has to be considered into which technologies may actually have the best opportunity to grow and scale. There is significant cost savings with an approach which standardizes, modularizes, and digitizes. And we think that India actually is uniquely and very well placed to take advantage of that, together with a very tech-savvy young population. Now, I said already, technology solutions and their maturity level are well understood, and this slide actually does summarize it. Now we understand this is a very simplified slide. So behind bioenergy and other zero carbon fuels and feedstocks, there are many sub-technologies. So this is a bit of a simplified picture, but gives an idea of which technology is commercially viable right now, which we see is deployed, and which point will be. I'm just conscious of time, so I'll move on. Of course, I'll be happy to take questions later on. Now, we as Worley, we engage at the forefront of energy transition in India, and this is based on our own research. We've kind of mapped out the trajectory, and when my team shared this with me, I was simply impressed by the opportunity India presents, but also the steps taken, the commitments in terms of funding and change of standards, which trigger a demand for cleaner fuels, is happening. So this is real. So this is based on our research, but we also acknowledge that things change really fast. Now, we can look back at the global level to have completed or in completion, we are in completion of more than 3,000 projects, and therefore in a position to take really a cross technology view on what may be suitable or not, and when to make net zero real. And to make it a bit real for you, I just want to showcase two projects which we are involved. The first one is a company called Liquid Wind, and they have announced to build a first facility in Sweden. They use CO2 from a biomass-fired power plant, and they use green hydrogen to produce e-methanol with an accessible scale-up timeline. So at the moment, they're looking at the pilot. Then in sometimes they look at 10, and then the second stage is 500 facilities globally. This is very promising, and the reason why I'm showing this example is we believe there is relevance for India in this. The second project I'd like to highlight, and goes well with the theme on refining, or the focus on refining today, is Shell's Holland hydrogen project. It's located in Rotterdam, and the operations are scheduled to start in 2023, and it's gonna produce 50 to 60,000 kilograms of hydrogen per day. Overall capacity will be 200 megawatt. Now, I'm showing this because the aim of Shell is to use this in its refinery in permits to particularly decarbonize the production of fossil fuels, and to support the industrial use of hydrogen in the heavy transportation industry. Now, I want to close my presentation just by saying and reinforcing that by coming together now, we intelligently can bring innovative solutions together and foster new ones. So I urge each one of you to be that advocate of a sustainable future, and within your sphere of influence. It's together that when we can make a lasting impact happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. It was very brief, and it set the tone of the session. And in a summary, you talked about the requirement of further policy expediency to meet the target of net zero. So in a nutshell, if I can borrow from Robert Frost, we still have miles to go before probably we can sleep over the issue. Thank you. So as we can take the questions at the end of the session, so I'll move on to the next presenter, Dr. Christina Fang. She'll be talking about an important subject of process safety. Over to you, Dr. Fang.
Okay. A small introduction about Dr. Christina Fang before she presents. Dr. Christina Fang is a fellow of, am I audible? So Dr. Christina Fang is a fellow of the ICHEM-E and a professional process safety engineer. She is also a registered professional engineer with the Board of Engineers in Malaysia and a Professional Engineers Board PEB in Singapore. She was awarded the 2016 ICHEM-E Franklin Medal, which recognized her exemplary contribution in the area of safety and loss prevention globally. Dr. Fang has over 30 years experience in safety and risk management, predominantly spent working in the oil and gas sector, providing advice relating to safety, engineering during project development, and commissioning and construction through to operational and decommissioning phases. However, to the span of her career, she has also provided safety management advice and delivered technical safety projects for other industry sectors, including petrochemical, chemical, pharmaceutical, water, transportation, telecommunications, and semiconductors. She spent 23 years in ERM, a global sustainability consultancy, in various technical, consulting, country and regional operations and commercial roles. Her last role was as a principal partner and a commercials director for ERM's safety services in Asia Pacific from 2019 to 2020. She is also past chair of ICHEM-E Malaysia Board for the 2020-2021. She is currently one of the non-executive directors of ICHEM-E Malaysia, as well as an adjunct lecturer with University Technology Petronas in Malaysia. Over to Dr. Christina Fang.
Thank you very much, Mavis, for the kind introduction, and really appreciate the opportunity provided for me to just share some thoughts with respect to where process safety fits into this whole idea of becoming greener and becoming more flexible in our operations and stuff like that. And I think on day one of this conference, I heard Dr. Ramkumar saying that really, our industry, the refining and petrochemical industry, is one where actually one of the largest investment, has been put in. So the investment for our industry is huge. And I'm sure that over the past 2 days, we've just heard of the amazing technological breakthroughs that once what we thought was insurmountable is now achievable. And while there is really increasing expectations for our industry to become greener, to decarbonize, to actually aim for net zero, I think those are all well and good. But today, I would like to turn our attention on a much sometimes forgotten, sometimes feared topic of process safety. Given the amount of investment that we put into expanding and feeding this industry to actually address the demands of the world, I think we all agree, my dear fellow esteemed colleagues that are here with us this afternoon, that really to fail is not an option. Indeed, to fail because of a process safety incident is really not an option. Hence, I think what I want to be talking today is really how, just to share some ideas and possibly some challenges on how we can all hop into this journey. I hope we're all on it towards achieving resilient process safety in all that we do, from the beginning when we start off our project until we operate it, as well as when we decommission our plant. Basically, I think, if we are not, I hope we are not immune to the story of Bhopal. It happened in 1994. While we are very thankful that another Bhopal has not happened in India or anywhere else in our region in terms of the magnitude of pain and loss that was achieved. What is really concerning, or the question that I want to pose to us today, is that, by not seeing another incident of that magnitude, have we been really good, or have we just been lucky? Because 2 decades later, what we saw was another major incident that happened, many, many kilometers away in Texas City. And despite the effects of Texas City, it was major loss of asset, there was major financial loss, loss of face even for the people at the board level. Although, there were not as many loss of life, the question that befits us today is that really, are we moving forward? Are we operating? Are we designing our plans with this sense of chronic unease that really, effort and commitment needs to be put in actually preventing another Bhopal and another Texas City? So I think we all agree that as people working in the refining and petrochem industry that we consider ourselves as working with high reliability organizations, because that is what is demanded of us. Because in order to make sure that we achieve the profitability targets, the production targets that we have, we need to be that high reliability organizations. And a lot of research have been put into defining what an HRO is. I suppose we can count ourselves privileged as being working in organizations where we have to work in situations that have potentially large scale risk and harm. But as organizations, we can still manage to balance effectiveness, efficiency, and safety. And how do we achieve that? Is actually the ability of organizations to avoid or minimize errors through strong teamwork, awareness of potential risk, as well, which is focus on the continual improvement that we need to do in every step of our planning, of our operations, from cradle to grave, so to speak. So, what is a key feature of a high reliability organization? And I hope we all agree that actually it is one that will focus on preventing and or limiting the impacts of major accidents and process failures, so to speak. And I believe that, as expected, high reliability organizations such as the ones that we work in, the industry that we are in, we do say that we prioritize process safety. But actually when the tire hits the road, I just want to ask ourselves this question. Amidst all the pressures from our stakeholders, the time pressures of getting a project online in the shortest time possible, really the concept of prioritizing process safety over all the other pressures, the competing business demands that faces us every day, does this whole concept of achieving top-class process safety become meaningless? And it's like, what the wise King Solomon says, a chasing after the wind. And often, safety professionals often get frustrated and we get demoralized because really, we are either the most misunderstood people or we are seen as nuisance makers and budget suckers because we are just asking and we don't seem to be contributing to the profitability, the bottom line, so to speak, of our business. And I think the other question that really, a key feature of what an HRO is really the ability of these organizations to be able to learn from past accidents. It's amazing with our current, increase in digitalization, in our ability to share information. An accident can happen over the other side of the world and you would get news of it immediately. But I think the question that we need to ask ourselves as high reliability organizations is that have we, or how well do we learn from these past incidents? Given that Bhopal and Texas City actually occurred 2 decades apart, it just shows me actually personally that there is still a lot of learning, and we need to look at technologies or ways, of how our organizations can learn better or make those improvements, and learn lessons, and so that we will not go back to the mistakes that we made in the previous way. And another feature of a high reliability organization is that we actually have redundancy in terms, particularly in our hardware, in our plant, even our people. We have different shifts of people. We have, people, different teams of people being able to run a process. And I think what really, it was a research that I started 30 years ago when I looked into the root causes of major incidents. And that was when I worked with a UK health and safety executive, and they were scratching their head saying that, look, if two plants are designed the same, why is one having more incidents than the other? And why is one underperforming in terms of process safety performance? And I think, and it's becoming clearer to us now that while it is really fun to play in the technical aspects of process safety, what we really need is the combination of the socio-technical ecosystem. And discussing with my colleagues this morning, actually, we were having this debate, what is the weightage in terms of the attention that should be given to the technical side or the social side of being able to implement the technical systems that are probably not new, because process safety is a subject that has spanned a few decades. So therefore, the question that I would like to ask ourselves is really, in terms of what we want to achieve in our process safety performance, what is it that will support our company in terms of, if we are good at achieving our process safety goals, then how will that contribute to growing the business demands that are before us? And I think, let me put it to you today that we are all very familiar about this as low as reasonably practicable principle. We think that, if we fall into this middle ground, then we are fine because we have done all we can, and we put up our hands and we say, right, we think we are safe because our risks are tolerable. But I think as a high reliability organization, I would like to put it to you that we should actually view process safety risk as more than just being as low as reasonably practicable. Just as there is this race to go to net zero, I think what the leadership challenge in terms of process safety is really, how do we get to zero incident? And some people said, no, that is just a wishful thinking, because if you look at the decades of systems, of procedures, of initiatives that we have put in, what we have is actually the compliance and discipline culture, that has been developed through the rigorous checking of lagging indicators such as incident rates and fatality rates. That has just caused people to just try to just follow that straight line that is drawn before them. But really, what happens when we see when there is a change of guard, when our older workforce retires and the new people come in, and when there's new technology that comes in, we start to see that plateau in our process safety performance. And worse still, what we are seeing is that we will be seeing basically and start an increase, a creeping up of unwanted incidents, and worse still, and we all heard of the Heinrich theory about many small incidents leading to a major big bang. So what I want to propose today is really, rather than focusing on to be able to achieve improved performance, to cultivate a resilient process safety culture, what we need to do is to focus on work on creating positive events, so that, the positive events will then help us to reduce the negative ones. And what do I mean by that? It actually says that, we move from just collating personal safety issues. We look at some of the positive events are, do we recognize safer actions, leadership recognition, breakthrough in performance, of well-being, the well-being of your people. And if we move across the spectrum to the process safety, what are the breakthrough performance improvement that we can achieve in process integrity, which actually supports our goal of really improving our bottom line. And one very key thing is really leadership vulnerability and acts of learning from the success and failures of good programs. How do we design early warning triggers that will actually give our leaders at the board level, that they will not see process safety as something that can be passed on to some technical genius, but really that they themselves can be at the forefront of leading in terms of creating positive process safety events that would help them sustain and be resilient in terms of their process safety journey. And I mean, I'm not saying that we should forget about all the negative events that we are reporting, but I think what we are seeing is that while we focus on the positive events related to improving safety and process safety, what we will see hopefully is a decrease in the number of lagging the lagging indicators that we are measuring, and we will actually be able to achieve a sustained reduction of those lagging incidents. So I think, what we need to do is that, we should continue to capitalize on the lessons learned from the past. However, we need to also think about how we can move forward and continue to mine, the opportunities to create positive events in our organizations. So for an organization to really become efficient and excellent in managing process safety, let me put this to you that investment in process safety is not a sinking cost, because when we look at the need to want to be able to achieve the process safety performance that we want, we need to look at being able to reduce the complexity in our operations, to be able to seriously respond, to low-level signals, and that is to respond at the highest level within our organization. And what I want to throw to us today is a challenge on how we can integrate. Process safety is not a slap on. Process safety is not something to be fixed outside the boardroom, but it is how do we get our leaders right at the very top level to be fixated on what is the next process safety failure that will happen, so that we can all put some positive energy into basically avoiding that incident that would cause us loss, not just in life, and we all see, the organization that ran Bhopal no longer exists today because it is really the reputation that one should be guarding with our lives, actually, so that we will not have to be answerable to our stakeholders and to the public at large. I just want to end today by just quoting Albert Einstein. He says, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So I want to challenge ourselves, even as we go away from this amazing 3-day conference. What is it about our thinking that we need to change with respect to incorporating and integrating process safety into all the new technologies that we are, so successfully implementing? How can we work collaboratively with our colleagues and even our competitors, right, to change this mindset so that we can achieve the results that we want, so that we can, run sustainable plants, sustainable businesses. And my colleagues and I at Grip Global, we are more than happy to connect with you. And I think, our view in terms of working with our clients is really to be able to come and come alongside you and help you co-create the success that you seek for achieving your business goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fang. It's very interesting. And being a refiner, I can attest that safety is always there in our heart, probably in blood also, I hope. And very interesting concept you brought in, like positive events. That's very important. Like we always talk about the other side, always the near miss incidents, accident reporting. So this is a new thought. And as you said, there is no competition in safety, it's always collaboration. So thank you for your very candid and poignant presentation. Now, our next presenter, I'll invite Mr. T.R. Varadan. He'll be speaking about improvement of MTBR and how it will help us to meet our objectives in all aspects, including reducing emissions. Over to you, Mr. Varadan. So,
Before Mr. Vardhan starts, I would like to give a small and very brief introduction about Mr. Vardhan, Director, Mascot Systems Private Limited. He is an engineering graduate from MNNIT Allahabad and an MBA from OUBS UK. He has with him over 35 years experience in the industry. He is a specialist in sealing systems and emission reduction for the process industry, and he has been a part of the API 682 committee in the past, specialist in helping end users to improve the MTBR. He has been awarded as the CEO of the Year in 2021 for his outstanding contribution provided to the process industry in India. Over to Mr. Vardhan.
Thank you, Mr. Nandakumar. Thank you, Mavis. Good afternoon to everybody. I'll just take a cue from what Christina said on how important process safety is in any process industry. While we have various kinds of process safety, I would restrict myself to just the rotating equipments or to static equipments wherein we have leakages and emissions emitting out of these equipments. In any process industry, a simple shaft or stem sealing in any rotating or static equipment is considered to be the heart of the plant. It's also the most delicate part of the plant, because if one of the sealing systems in any of the rotating or static equipment gives way, we have issues, as in the process plant can come down, maybe for a few hours, maybe for a few days. Moving towards improved BMTVR and a light on what I'm going to throw on how emissions can be contained both in rotating and in static equipments. Back in 1994, we had the API looking at the possibility of improving the mechanical seal life in all rotating equipment. And that's when came up the API 682, a document which since have moved into the 4th edition as of 2021. Typically, when you see in mechanical seals, the leakages occurred across the shaft, the sleeve, and across the seal faces. To improve these lives, the first and foremost that they put in is the removal of any plastic sealing systems on this, for example, Teflon, and introduced elastomeric, namely either a fluoroelastomer as in Viton or a perfluoroelastomer as in Calrus. So why are we so keen that we need to improve our mean time between failures? 2 reasons. One is with increased failures of equipment. Here, as in centrifugal pumps, we have the mechanical seals. The cost for the industry rises drastically. 1. 2, both in terms of cost of the mechanical seals and other hardware involved, plus the process loss because of production loss because of the downtime. When we talked of sealing, we talked of the fluoroelastomers as in Viton, but we didn't talk much about the perfluoroelastomers as in Calrus. In today's industry, across all refiners, we have only one aspect when we change to a perfluoroelastomer, as they say, we need a perfluoroelastomer as in Calrus. But in each of these perfluoroelastomers, we have a variety wherein each particular process would need a different perfluoroelastomer. By ensuring that we have the right perfluoroelastomer, we can improve the mean time between failures in each of these rotating equipments. The most important thing which is involved in these perfluoroelastomers is the fact that the swell involved due to the process that it's handling could be varied, starting from a 5% swell right up to 15% swell. When the swell of the O-ring goes up to as high as a 15%, what actually happens is the equipment fails and the mechanical seal tends to leak, by which we have two problems. One is the production loss or the failure in the equipment, and the second is the process liquid coming out into the atmosphere, by which we have emissions coming into place. By using the right elastomer across for all your equipments would only help you in improving the mean time between failures. The second point that I was trying to highlight here is on the emissions that are being seen out of the process industry. Most emissions that occur in a refinery is through the flare. The second is through various rotating equipments like the compressors, pumps, and the last one being the valves. Valves being a static equipment, we tend to use a graphite packing typically to seal the valve stems to ensure there are little emissions. However, as all process people would agree with me, we tend to go tighten the glands time and again to ensure we are able to keep the leakages well below the prescribed limits. Today, API specifies for these greenhouse emissions that the emission level should not exceed higher than 100 ppm. What we see in a plant today is emission levels ranging from anywhere between 1,000 to 5,000 ppm. Imagine a plant shedding out emissions to a level of an average of say 1,500 ppm. It actually enhances the amount of emissions that are there in the atmosphere. It's kind of how it's going to work on the safety of the people working there. And plus, it adds up to the climate change. Calrus valve stem packings, if introduced in each of these valves, tend to ensure we are able to keep the emission levels to as low as 5 to 20 ppm. What's more important is, in the event of any upset condition inside the process, these stem packings automatically work towards a situation wherein the tightening of the valve stem packing happens, yet the emission levels are still contained to a level between 5 to 20 ppm. Maybe there's a process change in temperature. Maybe there's a process change in terms of pressure. Maybe there's a process change in terms of change of fluid that you're processing through the valves. The second point which is important here while using these valve stem packings is, once installed, you do not need to personally monitor these valves every week as is normally done in any refinery. You tend to monitor this maybe once in 6 months just to reaffirm that the emission levels are low. These are self-acting, by which we are able to achieve the required levels of emissions. Now, what happens when you have problems occurring in your valves? More often than not, we tend to replace the entire valve. We tend to change the stem. We tend to change the packings. And notwithstanding all that, we still live with the emissions that these valves emit out. Now, with this in place, we have, just for an example for you, we have been able to put it across to a major refinery in India, south-based refinery, wherein approximately 2,800 valves were installed with these Calros valve stem packings. And the levels of emissions that we are noticing there is anywhere between 5 to 25 ppm. With this, we are able to, one, improve the mean time between failures, two, reduce emissions, which are quite a bit as we see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vardhan. You talk about an interesting subject. People tend to overlook the emission coming from valves and rotating equipment shafts, particularly because they always see that the process side of it, not the emission aspect of it. Very interesting perspective. So we'll see. We'll hope that the participants can make use of this information of controlling the emission levels. So over to
one last thing, just to share with you, Mr. Nandakumar, we have it's about 2 years since these KVSP parts have been installed in a southern refinery for a petrochemical complex, and they have been performing for the last 2 years without a problem, with extremely low emission levels.
All right. So very interesting input. So now we'll move to our the last presenter of this session, Mr. Tansen Chowdhury. Will be regarding about the product flexibility with respect to instrumentation aspect of it. So Mavis, you can give an introduction while Mr. Chowdhury can upload his presentation. Thank you.
A brief introduction about Dr. Tansen Chowdhury. He is the Chief Operations Officer at Fluids Controls Private Limited. He is a PhD Mechanical Engineering from IIT Bombay. Worked in General Electric's global R&D in US and Europe. Later moved with GE's consumer business as General Manager for Supply Chain and Sales, handling P&L. Has published 9 global patents, 20 plus international journal publications. From year 2011, he's been running a business, Fluid Controls, as COO and CTO at Pune, having 250 plus employees, and have grown 10 times in the last 9 years. He's a board of member at Government College of Engineering, Pune, as well as Government College of Engineering at Jalgaon, Singhgarh College of Engineering, Pune, and Marathwada Mitra Mandal College Engineering, Pune. He's also visiting faculty at Symbiosis Institute of Business Management and Symbiosis Institute of Operations Management, as well as Symbiosis Institute of Technology. Over to Dr. Tansen Chowdhury for his presentation on product flexibility.
Thank you, Mavis, and with due permission from the chairman, Nandakumar sir, would like to move on. I'm just trying to have my presentation uploaded. Okay, so I'm on the first slide. Indeed, the sequence of the presenters helped me get into my topic quite easily, and as Mr. Vardhan also said, emission and the sort of related product safety, what Dr. Christina also referred. So I'm going to talk about the flexibility, and now here looking at the petroleum, oil and gas business where we come from, how the instrumentation products could be leveraged across in terms of the usage as such. Okay. So let me move on to the next slide. Next, can you move on to the next slide, please? Yeah. When we talk about instrumentation, these are the products which primarily come in our mind. Okay, these are like valves, fittings, manifolds, flanges, clamps, and so on and so forth. And of course, there are some closed couple hookups, etc. What am I going to talk about is this, that these are typical oil and gas products of the instrumentation segment. Where are those flexibility in other segments as such these products typically carry? So I'm going to connect the oil and gas segment to the other segments where the same products could be used in different forms and functions. And still the expectations as in instrumentation product which is the pressure and measurements, etc., at high severity can be still leveraged. I'm moving to the slide number 3. Typically, just to refresh, in oil and gas, yes, typically we understand this is how the plant and the flow control would happen. So if you look at the slide number 5, it is all about the systems which typically currently everybody uses, basically for transmitters, gauges, etc. And whole conference is all about oil and gas. So I'm not going to dwell more on these sort of products because the uses of these products in these segments is quite well known. So getting into my next slide is where slide number 6, I'm going to talk about where these fittings valves are used in the railways and sort of mobility community. Okay. So if you see the slide number 7, you will see the same products, and the typical photo depicts that it is nothing but the brake piping systems of these moving elements, which is like metro coaches or locomotives or the regular coaches of the train, etc. Okay, so the products are same. The expectations here are, yes, more on vibration side, more on impulses, and they subject to a lot of operations changes, environments, and corrosion, and so on and so forth. So if you look at the next slide, which I'm talking about, is the same products which oil and gas segment has are getting leveraged into the other segments as well in terms of their usability as a product flexibility. Okay, so I'll move on to my next slide in terms of now the same products, the machines and the usability, what is used. Like on the left side, what you see is the typical crimping machine, swedging machine, which is used in oil and gas for the fitting purposes, are still used in the other sort of railways segments as well. And using the same innovation concepts, we also have given a unique solution to the railway industry in terms of connecting the bottom side of the railway to the top side of the railway in terms of the flowing. What is instrumentation is measurement of what flows inside as a flow or a fluid, basically. Okay, so I'll move on to my next slide, where now I'm going to talk about the similar products getting leveraged and used in power industry. And when I refer power, you will see on slide 11, I'm talking about nothing but the nuclear industry. Okay, when I say nuclear industry, it is nuclear power generation, where the manifold concepts what we have in oil and gas is still used on a different level, and say that, yes, can I have a bellow seal manifold where it is more in terms of the high pressure, temperature, and of course, more reliability in terms of, because these products sit into the reactor, basically. Okay. So on my slide 12, I'm talking about the 5-wall manifolds, which is used in instrumentation industry, is leveraged in nuclear power for high pressure, which is 110 bar and temperature to 300 degrees Celsius tune, where the expectation of sealing, what Mr. Vardhan also referred, is also being critically required to perform, because using this particular thing more often in terms of reliability, you don't want anything to really stop over, etc. So I'm moving to the next slide. I'm keeping the tab of the time also, being the last presenter, I need to accommodate, and so the chairman, otherwise I don't want to get under the pressure from the organizers. So I will just not take more than 5 minutes, basically. It's 3 o'clock now. So now I'm moving to the defense industry, the similar products, and slide 14, you will see that this is nothing but surface launch vehicles of the missile. Okay. And the next slide, you will see that the same instrumentation products, which the oil and gas or defense or power or whatever we saw, even the railways uses, are getting used into the defense launch vehicles as well. And the circuit looks quite okay, complicated, but yes, the next slide will talk about the more detail about the instrumentation products, basically. Okay, so the flexibility of the product is nothing but the use of knowing what the particular each product in this segment is expected to perform. Oil and gas expect it at one end from different angles, but none of this industry is going to let go the reliability and the product functionality and the fitment expected out of it. Okay. So my next slide is all about talking about the flexibility of the products coming out of the oil and gas as instrumentation, and where in all these segments it could be leveraged. Okay. So slide 18 is nothing but the vertical talks about the instrumentation products from the oil and gas perspective, fittings, valves, flanges, clamps, and of course tubes also. And you see on the right side is all about the verticals, what I just shared you, that okay, railway uses it for a brake piping system, oil and gas, we use it in instrumentation segment, where the criticality of leakage, fugitive emission, fire safe, etc. is required. Power, nuclear power, we have seen that, yes, you don't want a back pressure to come up, you don't want a nuclear reactor steam to be leaked, etc. So there is a reliability expected. And of course, in defense segment also, we have seen that how the launch, when the satellites, when the missiles are launched, how do you want a back pressure and of course a forward pressure in the beginning to be withstood by these products, which are nothing but, again, system critical from the flexibility perspective. So the concept which I wanted to launch on is the products of one segment at the same severity and leverage can be leveraged in the other segment with the same reliability. And the flexibility is of course there, and it is many global standards like ASME, ASTM, etc. driving the functionality of the products across the segments. So the last slide of mine, which is all about where all these products are currently going. And of course, I represent a company called Fluid Controls, which is in this segment from 1974. And we work with many sort of research institutes also to have the same products functionality offered into the next product functionality in terms of the fit, function, and form, basically in terms of the reliability. So the next slide of mine is on nothing but all about really talking about the localization and of course having the one product leveraging flexibility to the rest of these segments as well. So I really appreciate this particular opportunity given by Chemtech in terms of the good topic in terms of the flexibility as well, leveraging and learning from each other as a segment, and of course giving the system reliability across all the segments in terms of defense, power, and oil and gas. Yes, it has to be. So thank you very much, Nandakumar sir and the Chemtech, as this particular good topic, and where I wanted to really talk about is that how the leveraging learning from each other can be even flexible, like the products are flexible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhary. Interesting. Of course, like from our production perspective, we see that sometimes even this manifold leakage has also caused downtime. So that's the last thing people like to expecting, in fact, in their production cycle. So very interesting, and this flexibility across various sectors, it's a concept. Probably cost saving measures, and there are some relevance in the overall business perspective. Very interesting. So with that, we come to an end of this session. And if any questions are there, we can take it up from any of the participants. Yeah.
Okay. Currently, no questions. I would like to thank Mr. Nandakumar for chairing this session. And I would also like to thank all the speakers, Christina, Andrea, Dr. Tansen, for joining us this afternoon, and for also Mr. Vardhan. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. Our next session will start at 3:15. So we have a 10 minutes break. The next session is on green hydrogen obligation in refining. And we have Mr. S. Bhartan as the session chair and moderator. So we will join back again in 10 minutes at 3:15 for the second session for today.
Thank you, Mavis. Thank you, participants.